Hello, welcome to How to Plan Your Move Abroad with PSS International Removals with Place in the Sun. My name's Liz, I'm the editor of Place in the Sun, a journalist, and I'm here with John Moynes. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Liz. How are you doing? Keeping well?
I'm good. I'm sitting here in freezing UK, and we're going to talk about how to move to sunny Europe and any other places, including, your brief is quite wide, which you're going to explain. So the aim of this webinar is to just give people an insight into what you do, how you can help them move abroad, which is a daunting business wherever you're moving to, how little insights into how much it costs, how it works, potential problems. So without further ado, can you just sort of start us off by telling us, when did your company begin? What do you do? What's the breadth of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, PSS International Removals is literally a family-run business. We've been trading now literally just over 40 years now. And all we do is international. So we don't touch the domestic market. We pretty much cover most of the globe. There's certain areas that are a little bit more trickier than some, but generally speaking, the whole of Europe, Eastern Europe, certainly North America, no issues whatsoever. Do a lot to Florida, seems to be a hot spot at the moment, down Spain, southern Italy. There's a big trend for individuals moving out there. But yeah, so we do pretty much the whole lot, but certainly if there's an area of any interest, please feel free. The guys just reach out to ourselves.
Is your office in Croydon? Am I right?
Well, we got a couple of depots. The head office is in Croydon, yes, but we've also got a very large receiving depot up in Wigan. We've also got a depot down in Dartford. That's really good for the crossing of the ferries, the European traffic back and forth. It makes life a lot easier. For our partners that send us their effects that they want to get over to Europe. And we also got a receiving depot in Essex. So we fairly spread out, yeah.
Gosh, now you've mentioned a few interesting countries there in your list. So, I mean, you and I have both seen that the appetite to move abroad has just not died post-Brexit for Europe, or if anything, it's been intensified by what's going on in the UK or across Europe, whatever. So you mentioned, did you say that there's been an interest from Southern Europe to go to Southern Europe?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really fascinating is pre-Brexit, it was a lot of second homes, so somebody would purchase a second home and we would send a few bits and pieces across to make it feel homey. But what we've noticed now is those having second homes are actually making that their main residence. I mean, we were all very nervous once Brexit happened. It was a big hoo-ha. The changes in regulations were astonishing. The man in a van, just nip over to Spain, put it in the back of the car, the back of the van. Those days are now gone. But the interest in terms of people actually leaving has skyrocketed, which was really surprising. I thought it may have the opposite effect. Yes, that may be due to situations in the UK, but I think it's more lifestyle. And I think since Brexit happened, individuals sat back and thought, you know what, if we're ever going to do it, let's do it now. And it hasn't stopped. I mean, certainly Europe has been one of our main destinations now, certainly. But even with Brexit, it's gone a lot easier, because the last time we spoke, we had just gone into Brexit and everybody was trying to find what are the regulations, what are the new requirements. But it's actually got a little bit easier now. The reason being is that we've been out of the UK, out of Europe for 12 months. And then one of the main regulations in getting goods into Europe, you needed to prove that you've been living outside of the EU for 12 months. And it was really difficult because the UK hadn't been out of the EU for 12 months. So everybody was seeming to pay duties and taxes, and it became a bit of a nightmare. Now that we've been out of the EU for 12 months, it has become so much easier. Yes, you still need to prove residency. Yes, we still need a proof of a utility bill in the UK or mortgage agreement. We need the mortgage or rental agreement wherever you're moving to out in Europe. But in terms of the process is a lot easier. The customs clearance is a lot easier. We've got really good, strong partners all around Europe who are constantly bringing effects back and forth into the UK. So We've got a really strong network with some of the governing bodies that we work with. So certainly I would say, even for the staff now, they're all well versed and trained because yes, although the main criteria for getting goods into Europe is pretty much the same across Europe. But for example, like if you're going to Spain, for example, yes, you do need your NIE number. But when you're going to places like Norway or Switzerland, yes, you still have to fill out a customs form because it's slightly different. But certainly, guys in the office, myself, and all those are really now well versed in what the services and what the requirements are when getting those goods to Europe. But certainly a lot easier.
That's very interesting to hear, because obviously getting a visa goes part and parcel with relocation. And whilst we should point out that you don't help people get visas, that's a whole separate side. I've been hearing on that side that getting a visa, just because for the reasons you explained, that people have got used to the process, it's become easier. So I guess that's the two work side by side. And we've been getting a little clarity on the whole new world we live in. So great. Well, look, shall we talk about the process? Because you come to our property exhibitions, you meet lots of people face to face. And I hear so many times when people move that they come to our shows and they do all their prep with it. They find their currency broker, they speak to find a lawyer, mortgage, and they also talk about the logistics. So when do people start think, if they know they're going to move, what's in terms of what you offer, how does it kick off?
Well, the thing is, surprisingly, I mean, I've been attending Place in the Sun events for many years, and the amount of clientele that come up and say, oh, never thought about removals, which is quite surprising. You build up this collection of personal belongings, sentimental belongings that you've accumulated for years and years. And obviously that's going to be part of your whole relocation. So I would always recommend to individuals, start speaking to us maybe 4 or 5 months before you look at going, because obviously there's an expense to making this move. And you can include that then in your budgeting exercise, so really start speaking to us early on, because where we work out our costings is everything's based on volume. So the quantity or the amount you're going to fill in that container that you're going to be shipping off to, because with Europe, there's 2 types of services. There's either by road, so we'll just drive it across and that's mainly like Spain, Germany, Italy. But if you're going to, say, Greece or one of the islands or Portugal, then we would actually put it in a container and ship it across because it's more cost effective. So it's about really educating the client, but also being able to give them budgeting exercise. So what we would recommend, and we strongly recommend this, is that we offer what we call a home survey. Now, depending on this game, if it's a size, if you've only got a really small volume, with great technology that we have now, we can do it via your mobile. You just invert your camera, walk around the house, show us what's going, and we can get a really good idea of the volume that you're looking at. But also, just as important, we know what material to bring, what the client's looking at sending. Is there special wrapping that's required? Maybe something needs to be wood case, an expensive piece of artwork, or you maybe have a piano that you want to send across. But also, when we come round to the house, and certainly for the larger volumes, we look at the access. Can we get a large vehicle out there? Central London can be a bit difficult. Do we, what type of volume we look at? And then after we've done the survey, what we then do is print out absolutely everything indicated, and then we base the cost on that. And the service is literally, you do nothing. We don't mind you packing a few personal belongings. We do request that you leave the lids open so the guys can do what we call a customs inventory. So everything needs to be itemized. So we know item number 54 is your chest of drawers, for example, or your ornaments or Christmas decorations. But once we get that copy of the inventory, the client then can look at it and say, you know what, it's a bit out of my budget. What if I left this multi-modular IKEA furniture behind, because I know if I take it apart, I'll never get it back together. So if we leave these items off, can you give me a new cost? And so that's why I'm speaking to clients really early on in the process. So by the time they're ready to make that move, they're really comfortable in knowing exactly what they want to send across and the cost thereof. And literally the service is that we do all the packing. We manage the UK export clearance, because we actually need to apply for export clearance. And And we also do the European customs clearance on that end. We do the delivery. We will remove all the wrapping because everything looks like Christmas presents by the time we finish with it. So your bed will be dismantled. We'll reassemble it at your new home. We'll put all the furniture into designated rooms. The only thing we leave, and you can unpack at your own leisure, is those boxes. We don't actually put your cups and saucers back in cupboards and remake a bed. But certainly, I mean, a lot of our clients also may find that, well, actually, I don't know when my house sale is going to go through. You know, a lot of our clients are using the proceeds of the house sale to cover the cost. So, but then the house sale may go through a lot quicker than anticipated. The property, for example, in Spain may not be ready. So we can also offer storage in the UK. And then once we get the notification, we can get that ball rolling and getting over there. But in saying all of this, there's a couple of services, I mean, that we can offer for Europe, and that would be either a part load. So if you've got a small volume, you don't want to pay an extortionate amount, so they pick it up and drive it straight off to Spain. You maybe want to then consider, well, it takes us about 2 weeks to fill a really large articulated vehicle for effects to go to Spain. We wait for that load and then drive across and work on really cost effective. But if you've got a 3-4 bedroom property, you may find, well, actually, it's more cost effective to do it as a dedicated load. And then we can get that over there within 7 working days. That's including the clearance and the whole process.
Right. Okay. And there's a lot of people who offer sort of similar services to you, and people might be tempted to scrimp. What accreditations, do you have for your service to reassure people?
Yeah. I would certainly say the very first accreditation every individual should look out for, and that's being members of the British Association of Removals. Now, it's almost like a financial guarantee because the whole industry who do international removals do request payment upfront prior to actually the collection, right? So that gives you the good financial guarantee that, God forbid, a company went into administration or something happened to them, you've got a governing body to go to because you paid upfront for a service that you are expecting. You don't want your stuff left in somebody's warehouse and then having to try and an absolute nightmare, because moving internationally is pretty daunting as it is. So the last thing you want is to feel, well, is this company got the correct accreditation? So certainly BAR. FIDI regulation is more deep sea international. So if you're moving to, for example, Florida, for example, then yes, you want to make sure that the company you're dealing with is FIDI and IAM, which is almost like an American accreditation, the International Association of Movers, where they have conferences every year out in the States, and it's split all over the US. So that's really important. But also, we are members of what they call Euro Movers Group. So there's not many UK member companies. I think there's maybe 4 in total that are part of the Euro Movers, where we've got a really strong network of, for example, we use different companies in Italy. So, for example, if a client needs storage, we can utilize and gain access to the Euro Movers Group to take advantage of their services and their rates. And they also then too have to be accredited. So yes, I would say that's the very first thing a client should be looking at, because it's not a cheap exercise. Unfortunately, moving to Europe or the US now, shipping line costs have skyrocketed. And even moving to Europe, it's not as cheap as it used to be. So paying that expense, you want to make sure that you're going with an accredited company.
Yeah, can you give us an idea, John, that because our most popular place in the sun, moving to the Costa Blanca definitely seems to be the sort of the most popular move. Can you give an idea of how much? Obviously it's how long is a piece of string with how much stuff someone has, but maybe for the typical 3-bedroom property, can you give us?
Well, I'll give you an idea. And yeah, generally speaking, a 20-foot container, right now, I guess we're going to be sending it by road to Spain, but a 20-foot container can hold the contents of a 3-bedroom property. Now, a 20-foot container is the same size as a normal standard UK garage, right? So 20 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot, and that can hold a volume of 1,050 cubic feet. Right? So if we say, okay, if somebody's got a 1-bedroom property, they maybe have a quarter worth of a garage. So in other words, around about 250 cubic feet. Then you're looking at a cost around about £2,500. And again, in saying that, That's all the customs clearance, the delivery, the unpacking, us doing the whole process. 2-bedroom property, so we say maybe half a garage worth of stuff. Then you're looking at around about 4,500. But then a 3-bedroom property, absolutely everything going, you're then looking at just under about 8,000. So, but that's as a part load service. Dedicated service, as you can appreciate, can be considerably more expensive because it's literally picking up your stuff. Unfortunately, through Europe, there's certain areas you can't drive through on weekends or Sundays, and so we have to logistically plan it. And then, but then you would be adding on a couple of £1,000. I mean, a 3-bedroom property directly loaded, goes straight over to Spain, you're looking at around about £9,000. So, like I said, it's not a really cheap exercise. Therefore, you know, making sure that you do look at the companies you're dealing with and making sure they got those accreditations. Yeah.
Interesting. If you were going to Cyprus, which is another popular location,
yeah.
and you had a container, what would that be? What sort of timing are we looking at?
Well, to Cyprus, obviously, we actually only do southern Cyprus, right?
Oh, yes.
We don't do the northern section, unfortunately, just purely because logistically and customs and can be a little bit tricky. But certainly, I mean, they're only looking at the actual sailing time is only around about 4 or 5 days, but its departure date may be out of Southampton or, you know, one of the major ports. But I would certainly plan on maybe 3 to 4 weeks, right, from the time you pick it up till it gets there. It's actually considerably cheaper because then with Cyprus, we would put it in the back of a container. We actually do groupage because we do so much to Cyprus that we've got part loads constantly going out there. It takes us maybe 2 weeks to fill a 40-foot container of individual effects going through to Cyprus. But then you're only looking at about £5,500 for a 3-bedroom property. So it seems really odd that sometimes you can go all the way to Australia to, say, Sydney, Melbourne, or Florida, New York, wherever. It's actually cheaper to put it in a container than it is to drive it over to Spain. And sometimes it takes a little bit of mind-boggling. How can it be that much more? But it's just putting in the back of a ship and off it goes. Again, though, yeah, it's a really straightforward. So Cyprus is one of the more easier countries to certainly get your effects into.
No, that was interesting. I was talking to one of the TV property hunters who was waiting for his container of furniture in his new house in Cyprus, but as waiting a couple of months. So he perhaps didn't use you. But, you know, I guess that comes down to the importance of timing and planning, which you said. So it's approach you as sort of early as possible in the process, glean an idea of the cost, and then what about when they, you know, when they've got their, should they sort of find out from you timings before they then decide when to go over themselves? I mean, it's quite a lot to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing. It's depending on when you're going to get the keys for your new property. I mean, I've got a client recently going to Alicante, actually, and she was in storage with us for about 3 weeks. She just got access to the property, right? And she gets the keys on the 16th, but because it's a part load service and not a dedicated, we can't get it exactly on the day she got the keys, but she's getting it the day after, right? And she's very, very happy with it. The only problem we ever pick up in Europe is when a client potentially doesn't know what the access is like at their property. I mean, some streets you can go through in Spain and Italy, one side of the road may be a weight restriction. The roads in France are very narrow. We may need to shuffle it or even get an external elevator because we have to take things through the top window. But unfortunately, these are unforeseen costs because at the time of quoting, we quote delivery to second floor, no additional charges. But unfortunately, on the odd occasion, you could be on the 7th floor and the lift doesn't work. Or, you know, the road is blocked off and we have to shuttle. Or even in the UK, we book a container and we can't get parking suspension. You smack bang in the middle of Chelsea, for example, and the roads, you can't get a container down there. Then we'll use a smaller vehicle and go back and forth. So, and like I said, it's all about, you're absolutely correct in saying what you're saying. It's all about pre-planning, thinking about it well in advance, speaking to, you know, I would always say to everybody, you know, don't just speak to us, speak to at least 2 or 3 different companies, but we've got the confidence in the service that we provide. We've been doing it for many years now, and have full trust. And all the packing teams are all employed through PSS. It's our vehicle. So another question, you should always be asking is, will it be your team or will the work be subcontracted out? Because that's just as important, because you may love the service and you may love everything about the salesperson or the coordinator you're working with, but really it boils down to the men that are going to be spending a day or 2 days with you the whole day. It's because most of our clientele are either moving a day or two later. And that's another thing I noticed, that clients who phone us up and say, I've got a 3-bedroom property and I'm moving next week, you'll be surprised how much stress they feel. And when our packers come around, that stress even doubles in, they get so anxious about it. But by planning the whole process and giving yourself a few days after the removal to run around with a vacuum cleaner, tidy up loose ends, have that party, because obviously in Europe they charge duty and taxes on alcohol, have a big party, drink it all, and just enjoy those last few days instead of having us come around, and it happens all the time, and then fly out the very next morning. You're just putting yourself under immense pressure.
Gosh, yeah. So me asking sort of what happens on removals day is slightly redundant, because it's not one day with this process. It's obviously stretched out to several days. But I mean, in terms of removals day, in terms of your company arriving at their house, is there anything to flag up?
Well, I would say just be prepared. I mean, I would suggest that if there's certain pieces of furniture not going, because when the packers come in, they just really want to get stuck in, right? And like I said, what really dictates their time is what we call the smalls, the china, the crystal, the glassware, because every single plate has to be individually wrapped, packed upright, because they're actually sturdier standing upright, as opposed to being flat to the top of each other. Same with glasses. We leave a layer of tissue at the top to allow for what we call a crush factor, because you're packing boxes on top of each other. You want to make sure there's cushioning. So a lot of time's taken in it. So being prepared in the sense that maybe you've got little red sticker marks. So anything that the foreman will walk in with you. He's got a list of what you initially indicated, but you may change your mind the day before that you may not want to take something or add something. And then just walk around, give them a quick overview of what's going. Anything with the red stickers not going, don't go into that room, because that's where my suitcase is with my passport. You'll be surprised how many times the guys will be packing envelopes and inadvertently pack somebody's passport, so keep one room always to yourself. You say, that's what's the stuff's going with me on the plane. These are my essentials. Don't go into that room. Everything in the cupboards is going, everything out of the cupboards are going, everything in the cupboards is staying. So just being a little bit prepared, and then the guys can just get stuck in. If there's anything there unsure, maybe just switch the kettle on every now and again for the blokes, but they all love a cup of tea. But they will wrap everything. When they finish, you get a copy of the inventory and everything they've itemized, marked, and labeled. And then they'll walk around with you around the property, just double checking and making sure that everything has been taken and that you're happy with the process. You'll also get a call from your dedicated coordinator who would be looking after you throughout the whole process on the day, just to make sure that you're happy and if you've got any concerns. And then again, depending if it's loaded directly into a vehicle or container, or potentially bring back to our depot. And then what would happen is literally 2-3 weeks later, certainly if it's a container, if it's loaded at your residence, you'll get the shipment advice, letting you know what shipping line it is, when's it departing from the UK, the arrival date, and also a tracking link. So you can actually track your container en route. We also do an introduction to the overseas partner who would be doing the delivery and the customs clearance, whom they would be reaching out to you beforehand to introduce themselves, and then dealing with the customs clearance process.
Yeah. Now, I mean, things can go wrong with removals. Maybe not with so much with a very professional organisation like yours, but I mean, your costs cover insurance, don't they?
Well, no, that's the difference. And that's the difference between domestic and the international market. With the domestic market, they would just give a blanket cover, like your household insurance, and they charge a small percentage of whatever that domestic cover. With what we call shipment protection, you're looking at 3.5% of whatever you declare. And you can be really picky in what you want to insure. So things like the kids' toys, you know, I wouldn't go to that extent, you know, or bedding and linen and clothing. The chances of anything that ever happening, I mean, touch wood, you know, I've never had to deal with something like that. But, you know, you've got this brand new 8K TV that's your pride and joy. You may say, well, actually, yeah, I'm going to take cover on those particular items. And say, for example, the total cover, and I always say, do it on a separate spreadsheet initially. Come up with a figure that you're comfortable with. And so if it's £10,000, you know, then the cost for that cover is going to cost you £350. But it not only covers you whilst it's in transit, once they do the delivery, you've got 30 days to just double check and make sure that you're happy with everything. If there's any damages and you haven't taken cover for that, you just reach out to us. We then introduce you to the underwriters, and then they will deal with the any claims. But I would say things like grandfather clocks, pianos, any artwork over £250, I would then recommend that we actually pre-build a wood casing for it. A little bit expensive because any timber moving internationally now, and this would include Europe, has to be heat treated and stamped to say that it's gone through that heat treating process, certainly very much so for the US. So again, when the estimator comes around and spends that hour walking around talking to you about your whole move, we'll discuss these things and say to you, oh, that piece of art, are you happy for us to maybe anti-wrap it? Would you mind letting me know the value? This is our recommendation. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's the client's choice whether they want something created, but we would just give recommendations for their peace of mind. If you've got a piece of artwork that's £2,000-3,000 to pay £45 for a wood casing, you know, it just gives you that peace of mind knowing that it's just giving that little bit of extra protection.
That's all very interesting because it will really make you think whether you want to take something with you with the extra packing involved with some of these objects. And you've mentioned some, well, slightly unusual things there, but what about things like boats, cars? Do you get involved? I mean, pets is a slightly different sub-market of removals, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I get a lot of clients, you know, who rather put their children in the container than their pets. But pets is a big subject. And certainly with pets now, certainly more so like if you're going to the Australasia area, the US or Canada or any area like that, they've just got to make sure that the pet has been inoculated with rabies 6 months before. So when it comes to pets, you want to be speaking to the pet relocator months and months, maybe even a year in advance, because you want to make sure it has all its rabies shots and everything, because it can't travel unless it's had its rabies shots and can only travel 6 months after. So that's something, but I mean, we work with a couple of partners who really specialize in that. And certainly, I mean, the good thing about Europe, you know, a lot of the actual pet relocation people will drive it over. You can drive it over, you know, and the US is great because you can almost take it as excess luggage. I know that certain areas are very prone to not wanting to send, for example, snub-nosed pets, like the British Bulldogs and that, because they're breathing and that. So I would certainly check that the country you're moving to do accept those certain pets. I had a client recently who had a African grey, they live forever, and realized that he can't send his African grey pet to Australia. He had the job and everything and turned everything down because he wasn't going to leave his African grey behind. So pets are like part of the family. So we do understand that's a real specialist market. But certainly, yeah, cars, we're one of the few companies left that actually do that at your residence. So if you've got a car to go to Cyprus, for example, and you've got a 3-bedroom property, what we would do is put in all your household effects, and this is all happening outside your house. We build a drywall, so separating that, and then what we do is we've got ramps on the end, depending on the height, the ride height, because obviously you don't want to be scraping on the chassis. We may have to put the container on the ground. We drive the vehicle in at the top. We put load blocks on each wheel, silica bags on the inside, and then obviously overcase it or secure the vehicle. So then we would be looking at a 40-foot container with your household effects and car. So we could potentially quote with the car, without the car on its own. You know, we get a lot of people recently, for some reason, a lot of hot tubs, you know, that we're doing. Yeah, it seems to be like almost every second client. We're doing boats, very rare. It's not that often. Yeah, but we get the odd jet ski, but then we just build an overframe. So we get a lot of, for example, things like ride-on lawnmowers, for example.
Oh,
We
yeah.
build a frame around it so we can utilize the space above and around it and so forth. But certainly cars, motor vehicles, motorcycles. The US is slightly different though. Vehicles need to be at least 15 years old or US spec to get in. Otherwise, you're just not going to get that vehicle in. So it's very rare that we do send vehicles to the US because not everybody's vehicle is 15 years old that they can actually get import approval. So a little bit more tricky. Europe, straightforward. I mean, to be honest with you, I shouldn't be saying this, but for the cost to send a car with us, it would be so much cheaper and more cost effective just to drive it over yourself.
It's a very interesting subject because some movers have said to me the most difficult part of a move has been the car. And with especially Cyprus, I mean, sometimes there's a lot of taxation involved with taking a car, or it's they want to take it because buying a car in that country is much more expensive. There's a lot of that's a whole subject in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, with Cyprus, for example, the vehicle needs to be at least 5 years old, and there's a certain amount of mileage that to be able to get it in duty and tax free. So if it meets certain criteria again, but then again, it's like we could keep on going back to about having a conversation with clients well in advance. I mean, again, like we get phone calls, I'm going to take my car to the US and I'm leaving next week, but the car doesn't meet the criteria. Then you're sitting there with a problem of trying to sell your car last minute, but it's again with Cyprus, as long as it meets the certain criteria that are required, and having the knowledge of the individuals that you're speaking to that will be able to give you that information. Unfortunately, a lot of shipping companies, it's actually the onus is on the client to know what the customs regulations are, right? I mean, we get it all the time. Clients will want to book with us, but they don't have, for example, a US visa. We still get numerous clients who think they can send goods abroad to Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US on a tourist visa. Customs look at it and they say, well, you're a tourist. Why are you bringing all this over? You end up paying duties and taxes. Now, a lot of shipping companies will not ask that question because the onus is on the client. We will never, ever take on a move. The first question we ask any client, what is your visa status? Right? That's the very first question we would ask. If you've got a job offer, if you've got permanent residency, if you've got, for example, Dubai, a nurse going to Dubai will only get their visa once they actually land in the country. Whereas the Australia and the US, you've got to go for an interview. With Australia, it's a long, drawn-out process. There's so many criteria you've got to meet. But with the US, you've got to go for an interview. 10 days later, they generally tell you whether or not you're successful. And then we will deal with the move. Because for the US, we cannot even export the goods without the correct visa. With certain countries, you can send it and not have the visa, but as long as that visa arrives before your container arrives. So we try and educate the clients, even though, yes, we send them the customs guide with every quote. The guys are knowledgeable. So why string a client along, knowing that they may not qualify, ship their goods, and then for them to face all these additional costs when it arrives on the other end that could have been avoided. It's just, I think ethically, it's not the right way of doing it. You should actually speak to your clients up front and go through that guidance with them.
Sure. And just a quick question on that from me. I mean, why you'd think that that countries would want new, sort of fuel efficient, clean energy cars? Why do they only want old cars?
Well, the thing is, I think with any country, they're trying to protect their own marketplace. This is just my opinion, by the way.
Yeah.
If you're sending a car, Cyprus, like you said, it was difficult, but I don't think it really is because obviously it's an island, right? And they have to import their cars, right? It's the same for Australia. They don't have now or New Zealand, for example, don't have their own manufacturers. So that's why New Zealand is filled with Japanese-made vehicles because after 5 years, they flood the market with the Japanese vehicles, your Toyotas and that. But they're trying to protect their own economy, right? So they wanted you to buy local, right? Instead of trying to get your one family vehicle in duty free. But also, you've got to take into account that we always moan about the expensive cars in the UK. Oh my God, these cars are so expensive. But if you go outside of Europe or going deep sea, when you send that VW, for example, that German-made vehicle to wherever you may be wanting to send it. Parts and servicing are going to be a lot more expensive over there because all those parts have got to be imported. So my understanding is that the reason why they make it so difficult is they want you to buy local and protect their own economy. Yeah,
that makes sense. God, really interesting. I mean, there's so much to take on board, isn't there, when you're planning a move, which is why hopefully this session has been useful for people, and why people should come and meet you, have a chat at a really early stage. And I also, something on your, talking of resources that people can have, I noticed on your website there is a cost calculator. Is that something that they can get a rough idea from?
Absolutely. All we do, we found that in everybody that phones up initially just wants an indication. Just, don't want an accurate cost. They just want a guideline of what they're looking at. So what we do is, if we know roughly the contents of an average 2-bedroom. So if you indicate 2-bedroom property, you go on our website and we'll say small, medium, and large. Small meaning partial, part, maybe 10, 15 boxes, and then you've got the medium, maybe 100 cube, and then the large would be the contents of a full 2-bedroom property. But certainly, and even if you know the cubic footage, if you've had other people come around, just go online, put in the cubic footage, gives you an indication of cost. It's a good starting point. But like I said, if I could get all our clients to start speaking to us early on, our lives would be so much easier and so lot less stressful for individuals, because they say moving internationally is as stressful as getting married. You're leaving family behind. You've got so much to worry about. It's cancelling utility bills and doing so much running around beforehand, let alone, the excitement. And you may have a couple of young children that are going with you. It's a schooling to try and organize. And, and then what we hope we can do is on the removal side, at least take some of that stress away. I always say things like, don't send your IKEA furniture. People tend to always want to take. I mean, my son's destroyed his chest of drawers so many times. I've given up trying to put it back together again. So, and I struggle with the diagram. We are then asking our delivery team to put pieces of wood together to form this multi-modular shelving unit that we took apart. So, and those things are not that, but if you've got a really good solid wardrobe, solid pieces of furniture that are going to last a lifetime, then definitely look at sending those and do some virtual shopping. Look online. I mean, I have a client this morning wants to send their electrical goods to the US, but didn't realize they work on 110 watts, not 220. So you're going to have to get step-down transformers for all your electrical appliances. So it's pointless sending your electrical appliances to the US. So it's all these little things that, even with Europe, the plug points are different. So you may want to just get a couple of adapters and then just change the one plug on the end. So there's so much to consider.
It's fascinating, but daunting equally. And I mean, most places have IKEAs now. So, I mean, you have to weigh up, is it worth me paying to ship it, or shall I just go down to the one in Malaga and buy some more? Yeah.
But also, you don't know what the property, a lot of our clients are in the process of purchasing a property in Europe. So that wardrobe, you may find that, well, I'm taking this big chunky wardrobe, right? It's huge. It's going to be about 50 cubic feet. It's going to cost me about £300 to send the wardrobe. And then eventually you find the property and they've got built-in wardrobes there.
Yes.
So it's really trying to find that balance between definitely my sentimental stuff, that mom's passed on or I've got through the years, versus the pieces of furniture, and trying to find that balance between the two. If you've got that, in the US, if you've got a property in Florida, and I've seen it placed in the sun, some of the properties that are advertised, your 3-seater sofa may be lost in that huge room.
It will fit in the bathroom, though.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So it's really trying to find the balance between the two.
Yeah, and a lot of people I speak to who buy from second homeowners, they kind of leave the furniture there. So I mean, there's a lot of shipping it back is a whole separate subject which we won't get into here. But yeah, well, look, John, that's been fascinating. I've learned so much myself. I hope everyone else has learned some things. And they can come and talk to you. They can obviously look at your website and find different information there, and come and meet you at our next property exhibitions.
Yeah, we're in Manchester. We're doing Manchester, London, and Birmingham. Thoroughly enjoy the events. It's so, we deal with clients on the phone, but I know the guys that come with me, they absolutely love it. To meet people face to face, to build that initial rapport with people. The environment, it's such a good environment. The other exhibitors are great to hang around with. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Well, see you soon. And thank you for listening, everybody. We hope that was useful. Thanks, John.
Thank you.